So the story goes, I don't remember this because I was only 2.5 years old. They gave me a quarter for standing and playing with the band. And first thing I did was I immediately put it in the F hole on the string bass, because thinking it was like a jukebox, where you put the quarter in and you get more music out. And it took the guy like 5 minutes of shaking his bass side to side to get the quarter out of there, and he had to get it out because it rattled when he played his bass. So, but that's kind of what a early style Polish band. And this was from in '56 when this picture was taken. This kind of band was almost totally dying out. I mean, by the end of the '50s, this kind of band was gone.
To explain what a polka is a peppy, happy dance in 4/4 or 2/4 meter. So there's 4 counts to a measure, and it gets people out on the dance floor. It's like a 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 da 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 da.
In polka music, you'll find trumpets, saxes, and clarinets, accordions, some kind of bass, either a bass guitar, a MIDI bass on an accordion or a tuba, and drums. And that's kind of the essentials. Most polka bands have some mixture of those.
When polka first started here, the music was very fast. There's a dance called the Chicago hop that you would not have been able to do that to with the early polkas. The tempo was a tempo of 120 or faster. It was extremely fast. Back in the 60s, a gentleman's band called Little Wally slowed the music down so that people could dance to it better.
There's a lot of different varieties. There's Polish style, which is the kind I play. There's the Czech style, which is more of an oompa kind of sound. Germans have their own styles. Slovenian people have their own styles. But it's enjoyed by a lot of different ethnic groups. People that came to the U.S., especially in this part of the country, came from poor rural areas of Poland.
Polka traveled across the Atlantic Ocean in the 1840s, settling in New York, where it grew in popularity. By the 1850s, it hit the U.S. by storm, spreading across the country to places like Baltimore, Cincinnati, and New Orleans. The 1850s also brought polka to Nebraska as Czechs fled worsening economic conditions. Drawn to the Midwest by the promise of farmland, these immigrants settled in Nebraska, establishing new communities and bringing new traditions like polka.
So everything you did was intertwined with the music, and there was no separating culture and music. They were all together. So for example, from my grandfather, I learned a bunch of songs that have no names, but for example, one we call the House to the Church polka because it just doesn't have any other name. Back in the old days when they had weddings, there were no halls back in those little towns in Nebraska. They would go out to the farm and they'd build a platform, a wooden platform for dancing out at the home of the bride. And then the horse and buggy would go out to get the bride from her house, and the band would follow along in a horse-drawn wagon behind the bride and the wedding party from the house. And they would take the bride from the country, out in the country on the farm, back to the church. So this particular song that he taught me was the song that they used for that trip. That's why we call it the House to the Church polka.
Polka traveled with these Eastern European immigrants from rural areas to urban centers like Omaha, as they followed the jobs in stockyards, packing houses, and breweries.
So if you've got a farm, a plot of farm land, and you've got 10 kids, that can't sustain all of them as adults, and so they came to Omaha to get jobs in factories and the railroad. So your grandfather worked at the brewery, and so he came to Omaha.
Yeah.
Eddie Janik was a popular and influential Czech-American polka musician and bandleader from Omaha during the mid-20th century. The Janik family produced a number of other prominent polka musicians as well. After his untimely death in 1973, Eddie Janik was elected to the Nebraska Polka Hall of Fame in 1976.
Why? Well, because it was the melting pot of all the ethnicities. And the draw there was the packing houses that had jobs. And that was the big thing there. You had Armours, Wilsons, Cudahy, and Swift's, the four big packing houses, all headquartered there with the world's largest stockyards.
With the Czech immigrants fleeing from their own home country, coming here, a lot of them, well, I shouldn't say a lot of them, but some of them wanted to kind of put aside everything from their old life and become Americans. So a lot of them changed the spellings of their name to make it more American. So they wanted to fit in and kind of pushed aside some elements of their culture. Maybe didn't speak the language in their home. So there was a segment of the immigrants that felt that way.
I had a great-grandfather like that. Yeah.
Didn't want to,
he was an American.
Right.
Immigrants brought with them traditions that reinforced their memories of the homeland. However, as generations pass, some of these traditions fade.
Well, because when I was young, it was everywhere. You had, like I said, 15, 20 bands. You could find polka music every weekend, sometimes 2 nights a week, just about everywhere. Sokol Hall on 13th and Martha had a dance every Saturday night for years and years and years. When the Polish Home was at 25th and L, they had a dance every Saturday night for many, many years. A lot of bars in South Omaha had music on Fridays and Saturdays.
Influenced by technological advancements in music and drastic changes in American music culture, polka's popularity declined.
So to give you an example of the effect that DJs had, like I said, our band, we played regular dances and we played a lot of weddings. And like I said, about 65 jobs a year. Within 3 years of having DJs come out, our dance jobs, the number of times we played a year, dropped from 65 to 15.
Of course, I've heard of the Beatles and Beatlemania, and that really changed the complexion of popular music in our country, and it really influenced polka music too, because now people had something that was totally different, and especially younger people of that generation maybe didn't want to listen to the music of their parents' generation. Maybe they didn't think polka music was cool, or they didn't want to listen to it anymore because there's something else that they could identify with a little more easily.
Nice. It would sure be nice if we had some more younger people involved. So, as I mentioned earlier, I was 12 years old when I joined Lenny's band. Lenny's band was the youngest band in existence because Lenny's guys were probably 6 or 7 years older than me. So they were all, 18, 19, 20 years old. So we were the youngest polka band in Omaha. And my guys are still one of the youngest polka bands in Omaha, 50 years later. But back, 50 years ago, every parish in South Omaha had its own ethnic makeup. So St. Stan's was a Polish parish. St. Peter and Paul was a Croatian parish. St. Mary's on 36th and Q was an Irish parish. St. Francis was a Polish parish. ICC was a Polish parish. Assumption was Czech. Our Lady Guadalupe was Hispanic, but
St. Stan's Festival has been going on for a long time. Every year, the third Sunday in August, St. Stanislaus Festival is the biggest Polish festival in town. It is on 41st and J Street. I encourage you to go. I will also tell you that I think they sell the most beer out of any festival there is. 8 hours of polka music and fun and games and people. It's like a family reunion. I mean,
One was when Peony Park was still around. There was a guy who had a radio show, a polka radio show in Omaha by the name of Big Joe Sidzyik. And he started this polka festival in Columbus because that's where he was from. And when it outgrew Columbus, he moved it to Peony Park. And so he would have, this would be on basically Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And he would have like 60 polka bands on those 4 days. And it was always the second weekend in September. And it was here for probably 15, 18 years. And it would draw people from all over the U.S. The venues in Omaha, there were a couple main ones. the building that is now El Museo Latino used to be called the Polish Home. And the Polish Home is simply a Polish cultural organization, but that building had, shaped in a U, and on the tips of each U there was a south hall and a north hall, and in the middle was a retail bar, and then so they would have tons of wedding receptions there. That's a place we played quite a bit for weddings and for dances. The other place that was a really very popular wedding place in South Omaha was Immaculate Conception Church's Hall. South Omaha hasn't changed. It just the main thing that's changed is which ethnic groups are there. So, like, South Omaha is mostly Hispanic now, and yes, it's changed, but what the Hispanic people are enjoying in South Omaha are exactly the same things that the Polish and Czech people and German people enjoyed, 60, 70 years ago. It's their town, their part of town. It's it's a place where their culture and their way of life can be shared with their neighbors and friends. And, a lot of people, moan the loss of, that South Omaha, but to me, it's not. It's just a different generation of people. It's still the same feel, it's just a different group of people.
For these musicians, polka isn't just music, but a part of their heritage, integral to who they are. Omaha's remaining polka musicians are passionate about their music and enjoy sharing it with the community.
So how was I inspired to start? My dad played the accordion also, and I have pictures to share of him playing the accordion in his high school yearbook, and I have the same thing in mine. I was inspired as he was playing when I was a child, 3, 4 years old. My dad would play, and my sister and I would just love to sit and listen or jump around on the floor. And when my dad was at work one day, I found his accordion, and I snuck playing it. I started learning how to play White Christmas, memorizing the swirls on the ivory keys. And he caught me, and I thought I was in big trouble. He was a policeman. I thought I was going to be arrested. And he says, we're going to have to get you a lesson sometime. I think I was about 5 years old then. So I started taking lessons when I was 8 and started playing polkas when I was 10. When I was a young adult, I belonged to the Polonaise band. I joined the Polonaise band. And the Polonaise were pretty notorious in the Midwest back in the 70s, and they grew in popularity. And we used to go on bus trips to places like Minneapolis, Buffalo, Chicago, Milwaukee, those places that had Polish festivals that had really a concentration of Polish people and really good bands. And those bus trips were among the most fun times that we ever had. The first picture that I have with the Polonaise, in which I still had a full head of hair with no beard, back in my younger times. And yes, we got to dress in these wonderful outfits I joined a polka band when I was 14, but before then I was playing polka music with another popular musician in Omaha, Bob Zagozda. He and I would play in my mom and dad's basement. We would play polka music on Saturdays, and my dad would encourage us, and then he would reward us by going and getting Dinker's hamburgers for us. So Dinker's goes all the way back 50 plus years ago.
Well, the other thing about South Omaha is you lived within, the family group was really close. So my grandmother lived across the street, my uncle lived next door, my uncle lived next door to him, my uncle lived next door to him. So I can remember my grandmother, I can remember my grandmother telling my dad, no Polish, you in America now. And that was the thinking back then, but what she didn't realize was that it just totally wipes out your culture forever because you can't get it back. And that's why, so there's a group of young Hispanic kids that are in a mariachi band that we got to know. And I tell them all the time, I said, don't worry about, don't listen to those people who tell you to sing in English. Keep your Spanish going, as long as you possibly can, because once you switch, you never get it back. Sorry.
Despite the influences of DJs and rock and roll, polka players in Omaha remain hopeful for the future. With the resurgence of bookings and a rise in popularity, polka is once again regaining recognition, and while it may never return to its heyday peak, polka in Omaha is still very much alive.
And now it seems like lately it's been like the last 5 or 6 years it's been coming back. Last year, we played more last year than we probably have in 15 years, mainly just because these Oktoberfests are coming back. People really enjoy having the camaraderie back and forth with live musicians. I think people now see the loss of their heritage as something that they really need to work hard to actively seek it out in order not to lose it. And it's just been a whole total change in thought about that. And I think the influx of Hispanic people into South Omaha has kind of made people of European backgrounds realize that if you don't work at preserving your heritage, it's gone.
I can give you a cliche on what polka is. And what Big Joe used to say is polka music is happy music for happy people. What I'll tell you is polka music, to me, brings happiness out in me when I see other people happy.
No one knew will ever do, and it's true, true, true. I'll forever be to you. I love you, no one knew will ever do. I'll be good and true to you, 'cause I love you, you. When we met, I knew my love for you was true, like an angel from above. You were sent for me to love. I love you, no one knew will ever do. I'll be good and true to you, 'cause I love you, you. Was true, like an angel from above. You were sent for me to love. I love you, no one knew will ever do. I'll be good and true to you, 'cause I love you, you. I love you, you. No one knew will ever do. And it's true, true, true. I'll forever be to you. I love you, no one knew will ever do. I'll be good and true to you, 'cause I love you, you.